Imagine being the most powerful man in the world, and at the same time, feeling vulnerable like any ordinary person. That was the paradox lived by Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. He could have lost himself in pleasures, wealth, and endless distractions, but he chose something radically different: to dedicate his life to serving a greater purpose, guided by principles of wisdom and virtue. This choice, however, came at a price. To care for what truly mattered, Marcus Aurelius had to learn not to cling to what held no value. Above all, he had to free himself from the unnecessary burden of worrying about what had never been under his control. And here lies the first uncomfortable truth. Much of the pain we feel in life comes from caring too much about things that do not depend on us. We grow anxious about futures that may never arrive, carry guilt from pasts that cannot be changed, and grow irritated by present circumstances we simply have no power to alter. But what if the secret to a lighter life wasn't to gain more, but to learn how to care less about what does not deserve space within us? It sounds simple, but think carefully. How many times have you lost sleep over something you ultimately couldn't fix? How many hours of your life have been wasted in arguments, comparisons, fears, and resentments that led nowhere? Perhaps you don't even realize it, but you may be allowing external forces to manipulate your emotions as if you were a puppet. Stoic philosophy calls this the illusion of control. Epictetus, another Stoic thinker, summed it up in brutal clarity. There are things within our power, and everything else is not. It's simple, yet profoundly transformative. And Marcus Aurelius used this principle to endure wars, plagues, betrayals, and the inevitable pains of being alive without losing his clarity of purpose. But here arises an important doubt. If we stop caring about what we cannot control, don't we risk becoming cold, distant, indifferent to the world? Isn't this caring less just another way of escaping life? This is precisely where Stoic philosophy turns everything on its head. Because it's not about abandoning the world, but about choosing wisely where to place your energy. The Stoic does not run away, he confronts life. But he learns to distinguish between what deserves his attention and what is nothing more than noise. And here is the promise of this journey. By the end, you will hold a different lens through which to see your own life. You will understand how Marcus Aurelius and other ancient sages used this reasoning to find freedom and peace even in the midst of chaos. More than that, you will discover how to apply this in your daily life. In small frustrations, in great challenges, and most importantly, in the way you deal with what slips beyond your reach. Because the truth is that suffering does not only come from what happens out there. It is born, almost always, from how we choose to react to what happens. When we learn to filter what deserves our concern and what can simply be left aside, we regain something precious: the power to live without being dragged by every wave of fate. From now on, we will explore how this wisdom can change your relationship with the future, the past, and the present. You will discover why you care about things you shouldn't, how this drains your energy, and how to begin breaking this cycle. And in the end, you will face a simple yet transformative choice: to go on living as a hostage to circumstances, or finally take command of what truly matters. Have you ever stopped to wonder why we so often make decisions that later seem absurd? Or why we insist on suffering over things that never actually happen? It's not just a lack of intelligence or experience. There is something much deeper and far more treacherous: invisible traps within our own minds. The Stoics didn't have the modern vocabulary of psychology, but they already saw this clearly 2,000 years ago. They understood that much of human suffering doesn't come from events themselves, but from the interpretation we give to them. The problem is not reality, it's the distorted way we perceive it. And here we meet the first hidden enemy: cognitive bias. Our mind is not a neutral machine that analyzes the world with surgical precision. On the contrary, it is full of shortcuts, illusions, and reasoning flaws. Shortcuts that, in some cases, were useful for the survival of our ancestors. But in today's world, they often cause us to stumble over our own beliefs. A simple example is the availability heuristic. It works like this: we judge the importance or likelihood of something based on how easily examples come to mind. If we hear a lot about plane crashes, we begin to believe that flying is extremely dangerous, even though the numbers prove it is one of the safest forms of transportation. Our mind deceives us, amplifying fears and worries that do not match reality. Now think, how many times have you wasted energy on fears manufactured this way? How many times have you worried about scenarios that never materialized, but felt urgent simply because they were fresh in your memory? That is the trap. You suffer over what does not exist, while ignoring what truly matters. Another powerful bias is the illusion of control. We like to believe we have more power over events than we actually do. We perform rituals, overplan, cling to details, all to feed the sensation that we can control the uncontrollable. And when something breaks from the plan, the frustration is enormous, because we forget that life never promised obedience to our designs. Marcus Aurelius faced this enemy daily. Imagine the weight of ruling a vast empire, filled with political crises, conspiracies, and wars. He could easily have believed he wielded absolute power, but he knew that was an illusion. His writings make it clear. There was an unbreakable line between what was in his hands and what was not. Recognizing this boundary was the key to not losing himself. That's the point. The enemy is not out there. It is within us, in the small distortions of thought that push us into impossible battles. We believe the world should bend to our wishes, and we suffer when it doesn't. We create unrealistic expectations of people and situations, and then grow disappointed when no one was ever born to fulfill the script we silently wrote. This inner struggle is silent but devastating. It's like trying to row against an endless current. The more you insist on controlling what cannot be controlled, the more exhausted and frustrated you become. And it is precisely here that the invisible enemy grows stronger. The more you believe in absolute power, the more fragile you become before reality. Perhaps now you are asking yourself, but if I cannot control the world, what is left for me? Just to accept everything passively. This is the temptation of skepticism and apathy, but it is not the path the Stoics proposed. The true antidote is not to give up, but to redirect your energy. Instead of wasting strength trying to dominate the uncontrollable, you concentrate it on what truly lies within your grasp. Your choices, your values, your response to events. Epictetus said that true freedom begins the moment we understand this distinction. And here is where the tension begins to rise. Because noticing this invisible enemy is only the first step. Recognizing that we are trapped by biases, illusions, and distortions is not enough. We must learn how to fight them, and that requires a different kind of reasoning. Deeper, more strategic, almost counterintuitive. The Stoics called this living in agreement with reason. Today we might call it something else: second-order thinking. A way of seeing beyond the first impression, beyond the automatic response, beyond the immediate anxiety. And this is where the story reaches its turning point. Because now that you've identified the enemy, you are ready to discover the weapon that can disarm it. A powerful mental tool, capable of transforming the way you interpret the events of your life. Imagine the following scene. You receive a job offer. The salary is high, the position looks promising, but something inside you hesitates. Your mind begins firing off quick images. You remember a friend who switched jobs and regretted it. You recall the news about a crisis in the sector. You also think about the safety you feel in your current position. Within minutes, your head is filled with conflicting voices. What happened here? Your mind triggered one of the most treacherous shortcuts, the availability bias. The memories easiest to access, the regretful friend, the recent headlines, weigh far more heavily than concrete data. You didn't rationally analyze the pros and cons. You simply let convenient memories dictate your perception. Now, consider another situation. You study for hours for an exam and decide that, because you worked so hard, the result must be good. This is another invisible enemy, the effort bias. We believe that dedication guarantees success, when in reality, effort is only one factor. Outcomes depend on many other elements, including some completely outside our control. The danger lies in believing the world follows an automatic logic of fairness, when it does not. And perhaps the most dangerous example of all is the illusion of control. Just look at how many amateur investors behave during market crises. They believe they can predict the market, make quick adjustments, and always come out ahead. But the reality is, The more they believe they control every movement, the more exposed they become to disastrous mistakes. History is full of brilliant people who lost fortunes because they confused luck with skill. These examples reveal how internal traps operate. But so far, we've only identified the problem. The crucial question is, how do we escape this mental labyrinth? This is where a powerful reasoning tool enters the scene: second-order thinking. What does this mean? Simply put, it's the habit of going beyond the immediate reaction, beyond the first answer your mind offers. Instead of accepting the automatic thought, you interrogate it. Instead of deciding based on first impressions, you project consequences beyond the obvious. First-order thinking looks like this: if I eat this dessert, I'll feel pleasure now. Second-order thinking looks like this: if I eat this dessert, I may feel pleasure now, but tomorrow I'll regret it, my health will suffer, and my progress will be delayed. Do you see the difference? First order lives in the short term. Second order looks further, revealing long-term impact and showing the bigger picture. Marcus Aurelius applied this constantly. When facing the possibility of war, he didn't just think of the immediate glory of victory, but also the human cost, the empire's strain, the political repercussions. This reasoning prevented impulsive decisions. He wasn't a man without emotions, he was a man who trained his mind not to be enslaved by them. But don't think this is reserved for emperors or philosophers. Second-order thinking can be applied to the most ordinary situations. Imagine you're about to respond to an offensive message. First order, reply with anger, relieve the frustration. Second order, if I reply like this, I'll fuel conflict, perhaps damage a relationship, perhaps regret it later. That simple pause to project the future already changes everything. Or consider a financial choice. First order, spend on something that brings immediate pleasure. Second order, realize that every expense today is a lost investment tomorrow, that the sum of choices shapes your financial future. Small adjustments, multiplied over time, define entire destinies. That is the power of this tool. It expands the horizon of consciousness. It forces you to step out of the prison of the present moment, to stop being a hostage of impulse or emotion. And it's not just a logical exercise. It is also a practice of inner freedom. Because when you can see beyond the first layer, the world loses some of the power it has over you. The opinions of others, manufactured fears, the temptations of the now, all shrink when faced with a broader vision. Epictetus said that we do not suffer from things themselves, but from the interpretations we give them. Second-order thinking is precisely the filter that corrects those interpretations. It prevents us from being swept away by the mental storm. But here comes an inevitable question. If it's so powerful, why do so few people use this kind of reasoning? The answer is uncomfortable. Because it hurts. It's easier to give in to immediate pleasure than to think about consequences. It's more comfortable to believe we have absolute control than to accept our vulnerability. It's quicker to react than to reflect. The shorter path feels more tempting, but it's also the most dangerous. Those who practice second-order thinking swim against the current. While most people live trapped in the now, you begin to see the entire landscape. This may feel uncomfortable at first, but it is also what opens the door to a more stable, more conscious, more free life. Think of any decision you're about to make today. Apply the filter. What is the immediate consequence? What is the consequence a week from now? And a year from now? And 10 years from now? This simple shift in perspective can alter entire life paths. It transforms not only major decisions but also small habits. What you eat, what you read, how you respond to people, how you organize your time, all of it can be elevated to a higher level of awareness. And here the tension reaches its peak. Because now you understand not only who the invisible enemy is, but also the weapon that can defeat it. The mind does not have to be a lost battlefield. It can be trained, refined, and directed. But there is something even more important: knowing how to apply this reasoning in practice, in daily life. It's not enough to know the concept. You must put it into action, until it becomes a natural part of who you are. And that is exactly what we will explore next. How to turn second-order thinking into a living practice, applicable to every area of your life, from personal decisions to professional choices, from intimate relationships to moments of crisis. Have you ever noticed how most people live on mental autopilot? They don't stop to reflect on consequences beyond the obvious. They just react to whatever is right in front of them, as if the world were nothing more than a chain of immediate moments. But life is not made of isolated moments. It's made of connections. Every choice today is a domino piece pushing the next one forward. That's why second-order thinking is so transformative. It doesn't just change how you decide, it changes how you see life itself. Let's make this practical. Imagine you have the habit of procrastinating important tasks. First order, you feel relief now, you avoid discomfort. Second order, every delay builds an invisible wall between you and your goals. Over time, those small delays turn into a massive gap. Or take relationships. First order, speaking without thinking may release your anger in the moment. Second order, each poorly chosen word creates cracks, and when multiplied over the years, they can destroy bonds that took decades to build. Or health. First order, skipping today's workout seems harmless. Second order, the accumulation of these small todays is what shapes your body, your energy, your vitality in the future. Do you see the pattern? The present always feels small, but the future is nothing more than a repetition of the present. But here's the crucial point. Second-order thinking doesn't mean living paralyzed by the future. It's not about being afraid of what's to come. It's about gaining clarity. It's about living the present with awareness of what it generates, instead of being a slave to impulses that tomorrow will turn into regret. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wrote as a constant reminder to himself, "It's not what happens to you that matters, but how you react." And reacting with wisdom requires that pause. That breath between stimulus and response. You can start training with small daily questions. Does what I'm about to do serve me only now, or also in the future? What's the hidden cost of this decision? If I repeat this choice every day, where will I be in 5 years? These questions seem simple, but they're like lanterns in a cave. They light up the path where before there was only darkness. And here we reach the emotional turning point. The discovery that the mind is not an enemy to be defeated, but a tool to be trained. We all have biases, illusions, dangerous shortcuts. They won't disappear. But they can be tamed, like wild horses that, once guided, become strength instead of threat. The real value in this is that you stop living at the mercy of chance. You become the conscious author of your own story. And that changes everything. See how this shift applies to different areas of life. Career. While everyone is chasing shortcuts and instant gratification, you see further. You don't just think about today's title, but about your long-term positioning. This makes small, strategic choices, repeated over time, place you in positions that most people find unreachable. Relationships. Instead of reacting to every conflict as if it were the end of the world, you project the future impact of your words. You learn to give up on smaller battles in order to win the greater war, preserving strong, healthy bonds. Finances. While many spend impulsively, you understand that every expense is also a choice against something bigger in the future. This mindset creates independence, freedom, and peace of mind. Inner life. Perhaps the most important. Second-order thinking protects you from the tyranny of emotions. It doesn't eliminate sadness, fear, or anger, but it prevents them from dictating your choices. You become greater than them. And that's the real power. It's not just about making more money, better decisions, or avoiding mistakes. It's about conquering something very few people have, ownership of your own mind. Today's world rewards speed, reactivity, the loudest voice. Those who can pause, reflect, and think beyond first order automatically become rare. And because they're rare, they become valuable. But here's the final secret. Applying this type of thinking is not something you do just once. It's a daily practice. It's like sharpening a blade. The more you practice, the sharper your mind becomes. Start small. Before replying to an email, before accepting an invitation, before making a seemingly trivial choice, ask yourself, and then, That simple question opens the door to deeper reasoning. Over time, this habit becomes automatic. You won't need to force yourself to think in second order, it will be natural. Your mind will start projecting the future impact of each decision almost as a reflex. And when that happens, you'll notice something powerful. The people around you will keep stumbling on the same mistakes, repeating the same patterns, falling into the same traps. But you'll have built a clarity that few possess. And that's when life changes. Because when you see what others don't see, you can do what others can't do. Second-order thinking is not just a technique. It's a turning point. It's the difference between living in reaction and living in construction. Between being dragged by the current and being the one steering the boat. And the truth is, deep down, you already have this ability. You always did. What was missing was the awareness to use it. So next time your mind tries to trick you with easy shortcuts, remember this: every impulse is just the first layer. Behind it lies a network of consequences, invisible to the naked eye, but crystal clear to those who've learned to see. And once you begin to see this way, not only will your decisions change, your entire life will shift into a clearer, more conscious, more strategic path. You'll stop being a hostage of impulses and become the architect of your own destiny. Every video here on the channel is made to expand your awareness and lead you to real results. See you in the next video, here on Stoic Mentoring.